Well, hello, chillins. This is the villain, Marty Skull, and you are joining us today on another episode of the Chillin With The Villain podcast, the classic wrestling review podcast. And today we're taking it all the way back to the rebirth of Hulkamania. Yes, Hogan jumps from the WWF to WCW in the summer of 1994. And I was feeling rather summery recently. I was in Orlando and for whatever reason got thinking back, said, what happened the time when Hogan debuted in WCW? So I thought it'd be fun for us to go back and watch this show and review it for you, the listeners of the Chillin' With The Villain podcast. To do so, joining me as always, the producer of the show, Mr. Samuel Scott. Sam, I'm going to guess that you've never seen this show before Hogan debuting in WCW in 1994.
This whole era of WCW is completely alien to me. I came on when we started getting it on terrestrial TV on Channel 5 in the UK. So when was that, like 97, 98?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so this is all uncharted territory for me.
What's funny is, so WCW, I think there was at one point, they were on maybe ITV in the early 90s or something, at least in some part of the country. Because I remember WCW coming to the UK in I want to say 91, 92, 93, doing tours. Big Damo went to one of them, I want to say. But it was funny because I, as a kid, couldn't really seem to get WCW until, like you said, later on, more towards the end of the 90s, you know? So all this stuff, for me, I kind of had to go back and watch a lot of this stuff, if that makes sense.
Which we're doing today. Well, a couple of days ago.
Which we're doing today. Yes, we are. Well, I'm going to get into it because we just watched the show recently, so we're fresh watching Bash of the Beach 984. I did have some problems with my Peacock, though. For whatever reason, my Peacock, I typically watch it on my TV through the PlayStation 4, and it just kept freezing constantly. It just would not. I got to the point where I couldn't even get it to start. So I'd watched all of the show up until the main event, and then just could not get it to work. I ended up watching the main event. I had to go from my phone to my TV, but I was getting to the point where I was thinking, I'm just going to end up canceling Peacock because I'm pretty sure I pay for the premium Peacock anyway, which is kind of ridiculous as it is. So I think I'm spending, what's the premium Peacock? $12, $13 a month? And I only use Peacock to watch wrestling
for
stuff,
this
podcast.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I guess
now we've mentioned that, we can use it as a business expense.
That is true. Well, that is true. But I don't. We've said it a bunch of times on the podcast, but Peacock just isn't very good. I can't believe they expect people to pay money for that. Right?
It's the rewind. It's like the timeline controls for me, especially for the service that has the wrestling on it. When you just want to go back and watch a quick spot, you have to jump back like minutes at a time. It's just atrocious.
It's strange because wrestling is like it's a catalog of all the archive wrestling stuff, right, and footage. Yet you can't. Well, the network was fantastic. The shows would be divided up in the matches. So let's say you want to watch Mick Foley being thrown off the Hell in a Cell, you could quickly and easily find King of the Ring 98 and then just click on Undertaker versus Mankind. But now it's not so easy. And you got to.
There's no chapters. Yeah.
Right. It's but you kind of feel like that's the whole kind of point in something like this. Like with a network, you could type in Honky Tonk Man, for example, and it would just come up of all of the Honky Tonk Man's matches on the network. You can't do that on Peacock. That's kind of bizarre, huh? Isn't that the whole point?
I had the WWE network back in the day, and it was so good. It incentivizes you to go back through their catalog because of its ease of use. Mm-hmm. Or like you said, if somebody mentions like a particular thing, like a particular match, you can find it like so quickly. Mm-hmm. Now I have to, and we do this for the podcast, I have to Google it.
Yes.
Find out information, find out roughly where it is on the card, and then load up Peacock. I don't have premium. So if I fast forward past an ad, it will play the ad anyway, then jump forward. And sometimes it skips stuff. I wish they brought back the WWE network, but I guess that's not where the money is it?
Well, the network, I think, is still the case for the majority of the world, not the US of A.
What?
Yeah, they still have the network in Canada, in the UK, I believe.
Dude.
If you do that VPN thing, you'll probably get the network. You're good at all that stuff. What is the deal with Peacock? Because obviously WWE is moving to Netflix, or is that just Raw? I don't know. These deals, I can't keep up with WWE these days. They've got so many deals, but I assume they're not going to stay on Peacock forever. Maybe they will. I don't know. I really don't know.
Does SmackDown stay? Like, how does that work?
I honestly haven't really kept up to date with it. I know Raw is going to Netflix. I think SmackDown is staying on, I don't know, Fox, yes.
Okay, cool. So what happens with the double branded pay-per-views? Where do they go? Both? One?
I think they're staying on Peacock because I think Netflix is just Raw. But more confusingly, I think the rest of the world, Netflix is going to have all of WWE's archive like Peacock does now. Everything's kind of separate outside the USA, I guess. So I don't know. Either way, I think WWE are making quite a lot of money.
So the network's going to go away overseas as well then, if Netflix takes the whole lot?
I assume so, yes. Yeah.
Oh, man. End of an era.
Well, it's been a while for us. Anyway, well, speaking of times when WWE are making a lot of money, back in 1994, they certainly weren't making a lot of money. And WWE, for the years and years, their biggest star was Hulk Hogan, who had WrestleMania 1, 2, 3, 4. He'd been the main draw. He'd been the superstar for the WWE. I had this discussion quite a few times with people. I'm sure we've had it on the podcast before, but the argument about who was a bigger superstar, Hogan or Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it kind of infuriates me when people suggest that it was Stone Cold Steve Austin, including Selling Wrestling on Instagram, who maybe I'll get on the podcast one day because he will argue with me till death that Steve Austin was a bigger star than Hogan. I'm like, dude, no way. Hogan, without doubt, biggest star of all time, or biggest wrestling star of all time. I know now you could say The Rock, but I mean for actual wrestling, it's Hogan. But obviously that was only going to last a certain while in the WWE, and I even had this conversation today with people. It's really kind of interesting how the wrestling fans or the wrestling community kind of, even back then, like sort of turned on Hogan, or not even turned on him. Maybe they were never with him, but like the narrative from the diehard wrestling fan has always been that Hogan can't wrestle and he's not a good worker, he's not a good wrestler. And obviously I totally disagree. But I think the reason why they felt that is because Hogan had a formula which worked very well for the casual fan that would come in to watch him. And that would have been the majority of the fans, 95% of the fans, if not more, came in and they wanted to see Hogan do his routine. But those diehard wrestling fans, they would be there all the time. So they would see the routine time and time again, and they got fed up with it pretty quick. So that I can understand, but I guess that turned into them suggesting that Hogan cannot wrestle, which I don't believe whatsoever. I actually think Hogan is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and I think that's not a shocking opinion to have. But I guess we'll get into that today with this review. But yeah, the year is 1994. Hogan had left the WWF. Vince thought it was time to move on, and it's funny. I was thinking about this as well. When Vince wanted Hogan to retire, Hogan was like 39, 40 years old. Really not that old, is it, when you think about it?
No, that's pretty funny.
Right. But I guess he thought, we'd come to the end of the line with this Hulkamania stuff. And I think that was fair to say that the WWF needed to go into a new direction. So Hogan is out of the WWF. He is filming Thunder in Paradise. He's filming it in Orlando, I believe at Universal Studios, which is the same place where WCW was filming. So Eric Bischoff and Ric Flair go and see Hogan on set and basically convince Hogan to sign with WCW. Now, there's been a lot of talk about this over the years, about how much money Hogan was getting paid, everything else. Hogan making way over $1 million a year, like a large chunk of money. He'd also got like a large chunk of the pay-per-view revenue and obviously like the merchandise money. And I guess the big one, which the wrestling diehards concentrated on, was also he would have creative control on his deal. And it's funny because you hear all this stuff, but it's like, I feel like Hogan was probably worth all of this stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people forget how big a stuff. Maybe not in 1994, but he really was like Hogan almost transcended wrestling. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, of course he did. I mean, you were just saying he was already filming a movie, his own like star vehicle, which wasn't very good, but that's besides the point. My mum would be able to draw Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
if I gave her a piece of paper and a pen.
Well, I think it's fair to say, because people are like, oh, they gave him creative control, blah, blah. It's like, well, I think it's fair to say in 1994, Hogan was more well-known than WCW was.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Right? Like, so, like, you know, I think it's so funny how people are like, oh, they gave him creative control. And I can understand why that could maybe lead to problems later on. But I completely understand why they did that. If that was the way to get him, makes kind of sense, right? Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. Hogan jumped to WCW, and it always kind of felt odd because Hogan just felt like such a WWF guy. So for him to jump to WCW is kind of like, what? It seemed like a bold move. But like I said, he's 40 years old. You know what I mean? So Hogan will his in-ring debut tonight for WCW, wrestling Ric Flair. Now, for years and years, Ric Flair and Hogan had been the top wrestlers in their sort of respected companies, with WWF for Hogan, obviously WCW for Flair. Wrestling fans have dreamt of this match for years and years and years. And of course, Flair went to the WWF in 1992, and everyone assumed that we were going to get Hogan versus Flair at WrestleMania 8, and that was scheduled to happen. But for whatever reason, this has been debated so much, Vince McMahon changed his mind on the WrestleMania main event. Apparently, his reason was that they did Hogan and Flair at the house shows, and the house shows didn't draw like great numbers. Okay. So instead of doing Hogan and Flair, they did Flair and Savage, and they did Hogan versus Sid. Now, I can understand the whole like I heard an interview with Bruce Pritchard, and obviously he's very biased. He kind of suggested that like our fans weren't interested in Ric Flair. And I just don't know. I feel like maybe something went down with this. It's always one of these great mysteries. But the idea that Flair and Hogan wouldn't draw, it's like, well, maybe you're right. Maybe people were just over Hogan at the time. But I don't think like Sid versus Hogan would have done better than Flair versus Hogan. Plus, I guess we'll never know. But this show does a really good pay-per-view buy rate. This was the highest pay-per-view buy rates for WCW till this point.
Oh, really?
They did 225,000 buys for this pay-per-view. And all the pay-per-views leading up to this were like around 100,000. So
okay,
yeah. So obviously
over double, yeah.
Right. So over double. I guess it's like, but did they sell the pay-per-views because it was Hogan's debut or because it was Hogan versus Flair? Do you know what I mean? So we still can't really tell if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you can't have one without the other, right? If they're doing it on the same card, you will never be able to pass that. So yeah,
but if it was Hogan versus whoever, would it have done the same?
Probably not, right?
Well, we don't know. That's what I mean, right? But the idea that it's certainly been a dream match for years and years and years. What do you think about this? The idea that WCW just came out swinging, like this has sometimes been an argument, or people have said this about AEW when they've brought in big wrestlers and not having them do like big matches right away. They did it with CM Punk, you know. WCW here, they didn't mess around. They bring him in. The first thing they do,
main event,
world title main event versus Ric Flair. What do you think of that?
I like it. It's bombastic. Yeah. Gets you talking and gets you excited.
You don't think they should have had Hogan just wrestle a mid-carder for the first show so they can just get the number from Hogan's debut, then the next pay-per-view do Flair and Hogan, or you just think coming guns blazing?
I don't need to be eased in.
No, I understand. I think it was definitely a bold
blazing
move.
For sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could make the argument like, oh, this guy just comes in and gets a title shot right away and beats your world champion. Though. But it's Hulk Hogan, right? So Hogan's acting career never really went anywhere, huh?
No, I mean, he kind of sucked, but that's Schwarzenegger kind of way. It's like, why are you watching? Like, of course, you're just watching it because it's Hulk Hogan in a movie, right? It doesn't matter how good or bad his acting is, but like, he was never really a box office draw.
He wasn't. But would you say The Rock was a good actor?
No.
But The Rock
himself,
does.
Right?
He plays himself. He's done well, right? He's the most successful actor in Hollywood. So what's the difference between Hogan and Rock?
Oh, neither of them are good actors, but there's still a gulf in between their acting talent between Hulk Hogan and The Rock, isn't there?
I think Hogan never really had a great role, I feel, either, huh?
Oh, no. What did he have? What's it called?
Was it Super Nanny or something he did?
That's it. Yeah.
Like,
that was it.
But they were also not massive budgeted movies either that Hogan did, huh?
No. Was Thunder in, what's it called?
Thunder in Paradise. It was a TV show, right?
Oh, okay. Was that the one where there's a shot of him like riding a bike or something going down and in the background they capture a guy just throwing a dog into a river and it made it into the final cut.
What? I don't know about this.
Yeah, there's a Hulk Hogan movie or show where that happens.
I'm gonna have to look it up. I'm sure if you're listening now, you can look it up. Well, it's also worth noting. So by this point in 1994, I mean, we're going to get to it when we get to the Hogan match, but obviously Hogan wasn't as big a star as he had been 10 years previous, but also he looks pretty much completely different to he did 10 years earlier as well, right?
A lot smaller, a lot more leathery.
Yeah. The size thing is a big, I mean, the Rock did that as well. The Rock, do you remember he got small for his acting for a while? At least with Hogan, I mean, maybe that was the reason, but it seemed like he must have got clean because WWF had the whole steroid trial.
Right.
But he could make out that he was, when it started like 91, 92, 93.
Oh, okay.
Then like the actual trial was in 94, I think. But it was going on for years, Yeah. But I guess Hogan could argue that he lost a lot of weight for his acting roles, right?
It's possible, but then why would you hire someone for a movie and then make them not larger than life? Like you hire this larger than life character physically and charisma wise, and then say he needs to like lose,
maybe Hogan wanted to be taken seriously as an actor.
Maybe
it seems, but The Rock, like I said, The Rock got really small at one point. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And then just clearly went in the complete opposite direction
later on in his.
Have you seen all this backlash to The Rock recently?
For what? There's been a lot for quite a while. Well, no, is there a new one?
Well, it's all kind of there's, like you said, it's been there for a while, but recently there's been a small handful of videos going onto YouTube kind of attacking The Rock.
Oh, it's like professionalism or work ethic or something?
Well, there was articles for that, but I'll have to find them. But there's one video, I think it's called like He Keeps Lying. And it's just a video about all The Rock's lies. But last time I looked, it had like 7 million views or something.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And another video, I think it's called something like Hogan. The Rock or Dwayne Johnson is losing hundreds of thousands of followers every hour. And it's a similar video, basically talking about all this kind of, well, The Rock's getting a lot of criticism for every single thing he does, like selling something, or they're calling him Dwayne the Ad Johnson. And that stuff I don't particularly have a problem with. I just think like, well, he's a businessman, like fair enough.
Right. Yeah.
Like, that I think is fair game. I think more so the problems of The Rock, and I brought this up before because I'd watched, for example, that interview he did with Joe Rogan, and we kind of called out on the podcast how it felt like he was just trying to humor and pander to Joe Rogan the whole time. And I actually made a reel about that, which he put online, and quite a lot of people like arguing back. But now it seems to be like the majority of people agree. It's almost like The Rock doesn't seem to have his own opinions, and he's very, very scared constantly of giving an opinion and upsetting anyone. So he's just constantly trying to stay neutral. Do you know what I mean? Trying not to ruffle any feathers whatsoever.
You had so many fingers in so many different pies, everyone's a customer for you, right? So it's just, that's got to be why.
Yeah. But there was a lot, obviously this whole thing where he kept lying, saying, oh, it's my first time at In-N-Out Burger, which he did that post 3 times, which is really weird. And
that's funny.
And the dialogue in it as well, where he's like, oh, I didn't even know how to order. I didn't know what the lingo was. And it's like, it's kind of odd. My criticism of The Rock was just that he would do all this nice stuff for people, but then film it all And
yes, we've talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of the stuff like people are giving crap for now, that funny enough is not one of the things that people are giving him crap for. That to me was the most alarming thing. Like, you can just buy your friend a car, our good
Bruno,
friend downtown Bruno a car. Like,
and then just rely on Bruno to tell the story.
Right.
Get it organically. That's how it should have been.
Or just do it from the kindness of your heart because you want Bruno to have a new car.
Right. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So yeah, a lot going on. But Hogan's career never quite took off like The Rock's, unfortunately for him. But I guess we should probably get into the show.
Let's do it.
Bash to the Beach 1994, July 17th in Orlando, Florida, at the Orlando Arena. What is the Orlando Arena now? Is it Camping World Stadium or, well, it's a stadium, isn't it? Orlando Arena. Maybe the Amway, is that what it is now?
Could be, yeah. Actually,
all these arenas, they change the names.
They change the name so much. Yeah.
Right, you can't keep up. So I'm assuming that's it. Yeah. They did a good house this night. They did 14,000 fans, which again, I think for WCW at the time was a pretty good number.
Okay.
You were putting.
Didn't they mention? Like, well, yeah, because I think at the start, didn't they say it was sold out? It's like, really, 14,000 sold out?
That doesn't add up. Right? Yeah, why does that add up? Yeah. Why would it not?
You think it only had six? Oh, okay. I thought you said it was a stadium.
No, Orlando Arena.
Oh, okay. Never mind then.
Yeah, that's most arenas. They seem to be between like 10 and 15,000. Well, it could be between 10 and 20,000. Obviously, with wrestling being in there, they've got to take the seats out for the set and the ring and blah blah blah. So
yeah, all right.
It's a good house for WCW. Yep. Hulk's WCW debut, the tagline of the show. So it's funny because at the start of the show, they really are kind of putting this over as the biggest match of all time.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, it really is a big match, but being in WCW just doesn't seem like the biggest match of all time, huh?
I totally understand what you mean.
Right?
Yeah.
It does. And this show, they've tried to make it very WrestleMania-esque. Like they have a whole bunch of celebrities. Yeah. Right. All this stuff. But there's just something about WCW that just kind of seems small time almost.
Small and cheap. Yeah. No, totally. I totally agree.
And it definitely did seem, we will get to it, but Hogan being in WCW definitely did seem a little kind of, odd to see. But anyway, start of the show, we start off, it's always WCW, they always start the shows with Johnny B. Bad.
Right.
But we see Johnny B. Bad take on William Regal or Steven Regal.
Yeah. Right.
And it's so funny how I find the whole Johnny B. Bad just like really fascinating in the sense that Mark Mero, I'm pretty sure he was like a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
Someone said, "Oh, you should be a wrestler." He trained like a very short while before then doing like job matches and stuff for WCW, in which then Dusty saw him and was like, "Oh, you look like Little Richard," and kind of pushed him right away as Johnny B. Bad. He seems like he had all the tools, Johnny B. Bad, just to become like a massive superstar.
Yeah, totally.
Like the physique he had, the charisma, crazy athletic. Everything seemed to have going for him, and you can see why Vince McMahon ended up falling in love with him. And I believe he was like one of the first wrestlers in wrestling, or at least in the WWF, to get a guaranteed contract.
Mm-hmm.
And it just never worked out for Mark Mero. And kind of by time like 1998, when he became the Mark Mero that you actually really enjoyed, he seemed to be very far removed from the Johnny B. Bad that we see
totally.
Here.
Yeah,
which is funny because it's only 4 years later, but he looks he's kind of basically completely transformed, huh? Like, very odd. But no, WCW seemed to always open their shows with a Johnny B. Bad match. And honestly, this match here against William Regal, this was probably the best William Regal match I'd ever seen. I thought this was actually really quite entertaining. And like I said, you got to remember how new and essentially green Mark Mero was.
Right.
I actually thought it was a really good match to start the show.
So I like both guys, as you know, especially Mark Mero.
Mm-hmm.
But like, I mean, we'll get to the finish, but like, it had me up until the finish, and then it just went crazy, like not in a good way. I don't know if that was enough to take you away from it, because it sounds like you really enjoyed it, but I was just like rolling my eyes already. I was like, it's just the opening match. I like these two guys, but for an opener, come on.
But they do, it was something with the grabbing the umbrella and then just the tights, right?
No, I'm talking about one of them rolls up the other, and then then the finishes, the other one rolls up, like he counters like a small package or whatever. and then that's the finish. But they did it so slowly, like
really?
It was a mistake. Yeah, and the thing is, it wasn't Mark Mero who kind of pulls it up. It was Steven Regal, who, whatever you want to say about him, like he's a good wrestler, like he's a good technical wrestler, he knows what he's doing. So it was just it's just weird mess. But it was so good to see Johnny B. Bad kind of, because I know him, like I think this is like the second match I've seen him in as Johnny B. Bad, but obviously I know him as Mark Mero. It's just crazy to think like how his Johnny B. Bad character, like his physicality of it, just is throughout the entire match. He doesn't like, what's the term? He doesn't kind of like forget that he's Johnny B. Bad. He's always performing. Yeah. And when you see him as Mark Mero, there's no like Johnny B. Bad that like appears. He's like a completely different character.
Yeah. And
I think like that's kind of underrated. I mean, you kind of said he looks completely different as transformed, but I also, as like perhaps maybe a negative, I'm not really sure, but or at least neutral. But like, I don't think people give him the credit for just being able to like play completely different characters physically.
It's interesting. So when he first came into the WWF, Vince, fell in love with him. He obviously couldn't be Johnny B. Bad because that was a WCW trademark. And I guess the gimmick was a Dusty Rhodes sort of idea. They brought him in as Wild Man Mark Mero. I guess Mark Mero being his real name. The kiss of death with him coming to WWF, I think, was them having his wife come out with him, obviously Sable, which kind of took all the oxygen in the room. But yeah, it's kind of funny that they didn't bring him into the WWF with, like, typically people come into WWE, or at least back then, and they make them more flamboyant or give them more of a gimmick. It's like in this card later, we see Dustin Rhodes, who's very much just kind of like whatever, comes to the WWF. Similar time to Mark Murray, but they make him Goldust.
Right.
And it seemed like with Johnny B. Bad, they toned him down and kind of blasé, I guess, in the WWE. So, but
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a shame. It's a shame he didn't have a better run in the WWE. And it felt like if he stayed in WCW, maybe he could have been a big star here, but also maybe not, because they kind of seem to only push, guys like Hogan and his friends. But no. I guess my biggest takeaway from this match was all the glitter that they sent off. And he comes out, what they called those guns he has, the bad, whatever they're called, these glitter guns, essentially. Yeah. Did nobody think to tidy up whatsoever? There's just glitter all over the ring, all over the floor. And it was there all night. I don't understand this at all. Again, that's kind of like we were saying, how things in WCW just don't seem as sort of big time as polished, the WWF or polished.
Because WWF would, in a ad break or if they cut backstage, would get the guys out to sweep all that. And then by the time they come back, it's going to look like a completely new, Yeah, that was really, really kind of Bush League. After the match, randomly, Antonio Inoki is there. I guess this was a part of Antonio Inoki's kind of retirement tour. They actually mentioned that they'd made him a senator at the time in Japan. I'm guessing this was kind of near the start of WCW's working relationship with New Japan. They do a little angle here where they're giving Inoki a plaque or something for like Lifetime Achievement Award. Yeah. And then Regal kind of butts in and says, "Oh, I deserve an award." And they almost have like a little bit of a pull apart. This would lead to them having a match the next month. Okay.
I guess maybe Inoki decided to work with Regal because, I guess Billy Robinson had a kind of big influence on Inoki, and Regal was the only kind of guy in WCW wrestling that sort of style. I do think it's safe to say, though, that the majority of fans here didn't know who Inoki was, huh?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, Inoki and his massive Jimmy Hill chin, granite chin.
He does have a big chin.
Yeah. He gets his plaque and a round of applause. And my question was to you is like, do they lead this up with something on the show at a later date, or are all these things that punctuate this pay-per-view like weird non sequiturs? But it sounds like, these are the beginnings of angles or feuds and stuff.
Well, they did a match. I think it was at Clash of the Champions. The next one they did a match. Yeah. I just remember in WCW, Regal versus Inoki, but I just remember like the crowd not really getting into it at all and kind of just being like, they didn't treat it like a big deal, considering Inoki's like the biggest deal ever in Japan. I think in WCW it was like on the undercard. And I think during the match, they're even splitting to another screen to show what Hogan had done earlier in the show or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't like made to be a massive deal. So yeah, but WCW did end up doing a bunch of stuff with New Japan and different pay-per-views versus New Japan, which sounds a lot better than they are. Like, I thought about us reviewing them on the show before, but they're really not that interesting. So next up, Vader takes on the Guardian Angel. I'm going to guess this is your first time seeing the Guardian Angel. For those that aren't too aware, this is the big boss man, Ray Traylor. He came to WCW from the WWF, and they tried to call him, I want to say, the boss, and essentially be the big boss man, just called the boss. That obviously did not work out. I guess the WWF must have said cease and desist. So I think they may have tried a few different gimmicks. This was one of them, a Guardian Angel. Sam, do you want to explain to the listeners what a Guardian Angel is?
Well, I don't actually know, but if it's like a certain kind of context, but he's wearing a T-shirt that looks like, if you've ever been to a Goodwill and you see those T-shirts of like kids' homes, like local kids' homes and kids' charities and stuff, that's what he's wearing. Like, is that his gimmick?
Well, I think a Guardian Angel, isn't it a group of people that kind of pretend they're police type thing?
What, like Minutemen?
That's think crazy. So.
Let's see. What, like vigilantes?
Kind of, yeah. That's what I thought they were, no?
Well, we're going to find out. No, I thought he was like a goody-goody.
Well, I don't know. What is a Guardian Angel? I just assumed that was it. Like, I assumed it was something similar to the police.
It's not coming up, no. Nothing's coming up. Yeah.
Well, he's not just called the Guardian Angel for the sake of it, is he?
Seems like he is.
No, he's not. They're not trying to say that he's religious and he's a Guardian Angel.
No, I think he helps the kids. I think he helps
the Guardian Angel.
With his Goodwill T-shirt.
The Guardian Angel represents a form of citizen crime prevention that has fostered interest and concern regarding the group's impact, motives, leaderships, and organizational structure. Yeah.
So like a neighborhood watch type.
Yeah, but I guess a little bit more serious than that.
Jeez Louise, that's a step down from Big Boss Man, isn't it?
Guardian Angels, a unique approach to crime prevention. There's a whole article here.
Okay, so anyone listening who's also never heard of it in that context, apart from me, let us know, because I'm feeling pretty dumb now. But either way, it is a step down from outfit and gimmick-wise from his past self.
Well, I just don't understand. So Ray Traylor's original gimmick was Big Bubba Rogers, which he'd done in the NWA, everything else. He then obviously, became very famous being the big boss man. Then they were clearly trying to stick to this kind of law enforcement gimmick. But it's like the best they can come up with was like the Guardian Angel, where he can't even, like, once he can't wear the outfit and he can't be the boss or the big boss man or whatever.
Move on. Yeah.
At that point, move on, huh? Like, he's wearing like a red beret here and a white T-shirt and pants. It's kind of the shits.
Oh, it looks terrible. You hate it when people wrestle in T-shirts, like in general, but it's usually like either one of their own merchandise T-shirts or like at worst, like one of the pay-per-view T-shirt, which is also lame. But this is like, again, like literally looks like it's his laundry day.
Yes.
And he had to come into wrestling. That's all he had.
WCW did have a big thing of bringing in like big WWF characters or gimmicks and then kind of downgrading the gimmick somewhat, whether it was Earthquake into the Shark and, Brutus Beefcake came in and I don't know if he was he ever called Brother Brutai, but he did a bunch of different weird kind of crappy gimmicks, the Booty Man, Zodiac. I'm trying to think off the top of my head other wrestlers that came in and just did bad gimmicks. Can you think of many? It seemed like a lot, especially around this Hogan period. You get the odd wrestler like the Honky Tonk Man, which owned their gimmick, but the ones they didn't, like, yeah. Or just even seeing, for example, Mr. Perfect come into to WCW and not being able to be Mr. Perfect, having to be Kurt Hennig and stuff like that, always just seemed like they, for the most part, downgraded.
Yeah. Who got a glow up? Anyone?
I'm trying to think.
No.
I mean, the only person I can think of that like climbed up the card in WCW, maybe Jeff Jarrett in later years, sort of a mid-card guy in WF and climbed up the ranks in WCW. I mean, I don't know, you could argue, I mean, I loved Diesel and Scott Hall. They became Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, Diesel and Razor Ramon. I wouldn't necessarily say they were better as them. This was a debate on the social media, on the Villain Pod social media a while back, like people being like, no, because we were actually talking about it back then, that wrestlers would go to WCW and kind of downgrade, or they had better runs in their WWF. And I think I mentioned Scott Hall. People were like, no way, he was so much better in WCW. But I kind of thought, well, not really. Like, yeah, the only things like Razor Ramon was like an awesome run, super over, had awesome matches. As Scott Hall in WCW, it's like, yeah, he created the NWO and did the Outsiders for a bit, but that was kind of it. I would definitely say he had like a better run, or at least better matches in WWF than WCW, you know? Because also by the time 1998, Hall's demons had got way ahead of him anyway.
Right.
You know? So
yeah.
It's a good question.
Kevin Nash, though, I'd say was better in WCW than Diesel, right?
I mean, probably, I don't know. It depends what you're
up to you.
Depends what you're saying. What's better? I mean, he was world champion in both. I would say he probably had better matches in the WWF than WCW. It all depends what you. I mean,
I'm talking about the cool factor, honestly.
If you're going to ask, if his question is, was he cooler in WCW, then yes, you could definitely argue that. But I don't know if you could, you know, like at least in the WWF, they tried to run with him as the top guy. They never really tried to do that in WCW, you know, the tippy top guy at least, you know? Yeah. So I don't know. But yeah. Well, Vader, he went to WWF and his run in the WWF wasn't very good. So he was better in WCW. But
there you go.
These two guys actually had a really fun match, again into the finish, but two big men. This was actually one of the best matches on the show, I thought. Like, I would have liked to have seen these guys have more matches and have some more time because, you know, despite the gimmick that Ray Traylor's doing here, he can definitely go in the ring, huh?
Mate, I was absolutely shocked at how like athletic he was, and just his strength was incredible. Yes. And like when you think of Big Boss Man, like that just doesn't come to mind, but he really proved himself here. Yeah, I was shocked. And he never like blew up. He never kind of got worn out from start to finish, despite stalling while holding Vader of all people for lengths of time before slamming him down multiple times. It was honestly like legitimately impressive, I've got to say.
I would actually say go out of your way to go watch this match, actually. I thought it was really
I think it's impressive.
Really impressive. I wanted to take a minute to talk about our newest sponsor, madcatbeardcare.com. Myself, I have a beard. Sam, you have a beard. Beards are very popular now, but you've got to take care of your beard. You got to get yourself over to madcatbeardcare.com. I'm looking at the oils and the balms on there. First of all, they're all designed by different pro wrestlers and marketed as different pro wrestlers. So there's a bunch of guys involved with this, like Matt Cardona, Brian Myers, Delirious, Jay Lethal, a whole collection of awesome wrestlers that have their own product on madcatbeardcare.com. Not only that, but a portion of the profits go to cat rescues around the country. So I think that's already exciting. But the beard oils and the balms both are made from organic argan oil, jojoba and vitamin E, which when combined helps to soften, strengthen, and vitalize and stimulate circulation in the face, nourishing and strengthening the hair follicles to assist growth. Now, this is what you need. If you've got a patchy beard, you need to get yourself to madcatbeardcare.com. The balms also include the same oil and mixture as the oils, but he adds the shea butter, which helps alleviate itch and irritation to your face, while also helping control pesky stray hairs by allowing you to style them into place. He uses local organic beeswax that helps to get more of a hold to your style. So you got to look after your skin underneath your beard just like you do your scalp. Like, these aren't things that you can neglect. And that's why we've teamed up with madcatbeardcare.com. And right now, just for listening to the show, you can get yourself a whopping 15% off products at madcatbeardcare.com by using the code VILLAIN. That's 15% for the promo code VILLAIN. That's VILLAIN. Pick yourself up the Villain's Curse, my own beard oil, my own beard balm. That's exactly what I use every day on my face to make my famous beard look beautiful. You can do the same thing too. So last time I'm going to say it, get yourself over now to madcatbeardcare.com. Promo VILLAIN.
You aren't a big fan of like big guy versus big guy matches, or you are, but you rarely think they're done well or booked well. I think that's, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I think that you've criticized like big guy versus big guy matches a lot before. This was one I thought that was an example of one done very well indeed. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was done very well. I mean, the thing is with this, I guess the reason why this worked though is because both of them, even though they're both big guys, they're both super athletic and they're both super duper strong as well. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it's typically, you know, when I say I'm not a fan of big man versus big man matches, it's not necessarily that I'm not a fan. I'm just saying typically they don't really work. This is an example of one that did work. But again, you've got two really special talents in there. It's more like when you put Mark Henry versus the Big Show, doesn't work as well. You know what I mean? So,
well, in the next match, we'll find out that talent doesn't necessarily equate to a good match, but that's getting ahead of ourselves.
Well, yeah. Next, Dustin Rhodes. He convinces Arn Anderson to team up with him against Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. Say that, Funk and Buck. With some reason, Meng Haku is on the outside in a suit, and Colonel Parker. This match, I guess there was a lot of criticism at the time for Dusty Rhodes kind of pushing Dustin as like really giving him a hard push before he was kind of ready. This match, Terry Funk's like one of my all-time favorites, but I certainly lost interest. And basically they take a long heat on Dustin Rhodes until he finally gets that hot tag on Arn Anderson, and Arn Anderson turns on Dustin, floors him with a DDT, and he's turned on Dustin Rhodes, and Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck get the win. Bunkhouse Buck, we're talking about wrestling attire here. Bunkhouse Buck just wrestling in a long sleeve white t-shirt. How do you feel about that?
He looks like, in cowboy films where they'll do a shootout and then right at the end, the outhouse door will open and there'll be one guy stuck on the outhouse gun. They're always wearing what he was wearing to the ring.
Yes, yeah. Well,
I've never heard of him before. Now, Colonel Parker, whatever his name was, that's Tennessee Lee, right? Big chap Tennessee Lee.
Big chap Tennessee Lee, yes.
Who's Bunkhouse Buck?
He's one of the Golden Brothers. He was like a territory wrestler.
Okay. Seems like one.
He looks like one, right?
Yeah.
It's funny. Like, let me just Google search him. Bunk. I think he just did a bunch of the territories back in the day. Bunkhouse Buck. It's funny watching this. You notice how like two of the wrestlers in it. Yeah, okay. He's the son of Billy Golden. Yeah, he wrestled in the South, obviously. AWA, had a run in WCW, it seems, with this, obviously, and then he also portrayed Jack Swagger's father once on SmackDown, and was choke slammed and tombstoned by Kane.
There we go.
So I don't know a whole lot about him, but when when you watch WCW, when I watched it as a youngster, you always got that kind of Southern wrestling taste from WCW, which maybe sort of held it back from just being bigger on a worldwide scale. And like this match, two of the wrestlers are wearing cowboy boots. There was seemed like a lot of cowboyness in WCW, especially around this time. It's 1994 as well. You would have thought they kind of moved on from that.
Be over it, yeah. But that's pretty funny.
No, apparently not. Isn't, like we were talking about earlier, Dustin Rhodes never really meant a whole lot other than, it's Dusty's kid.
Right.
And then he goes to the WWF and they just completely transform him, giving him that Goldust gimmick. it seems like now, I mean, in WWE, they do seem to give some people gimmicks, but a lot of the times they just let wrestlers kind of come in as themselves. In AEW, again, guys can come in with a gimmick, but it's typically one they've created themselves. Like here, when Goldust was Goldust, it was like a whole creative services process for the WWF. And they made this gimmick and gave it to Goldust. Or they might have, made it for him. But that seems to be kind of like it doesn't really seem to happen anymore. And I think that's a shame because you look at the difference between Goldust and Dustin Rhodes, like it just shows you how important like the right gimmick is for someone. Do you know what I mean?
I think it was lightning in a bottle because even when he's in AEW and just playing as himself, it's kind of boring. Back when he's Dustin Rhodes back in the day, boring. Pick anything that he's done that isn't Goldust. Who cares, But Goldust is like my favorite wrestler. It was just, which you knew. It's just crazy, just like how the right gimmick for the right person who's willing to take it on can just transform, can just create something like that. But yeah, Goldust rocks. Dustin Rhodes, one of my favorite wrestlers. Terry Funk, one of your favorite wrestlers and one of mine. This is one of these absolutely fascinating, like terrible matches considering the degree of talent within it, right? Saudi Arabia style.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we go that far, but I was watching this and during it, Terry Funk does that like drunken cell. And it's funny because he does it and for some reason it works, like he gets away with it or it makes sense. I feel like Terry Funk's one of the only few wrestlers in the world that can do that drunken cell. I think anyone else that like did it, people would just kind of be like, what is he doing? But for some reason with Terry Funk, it just, I guess with that kind of middle-aged and crazy gimmick, it just, a lot of his stuff, a lot of his setting, again, I've said this before on the show, like you could try to replicate it, but it just doesn't work for anyone else but Terry Funk. But yeah, I do love the old drunken cell from Terry Funk. But yeah, that was that. Mean Gene Okerlund is here, and dude, Mean Gene Okerlund, like, just so good, man. Like we miss characters like Mean Gene Okerlund in wrestling now, I think. And for whatever reason, even though a lot of the stuff he was doing seemed slightly ridiculous, like he always treated it seriously. And
okay, this is
go on. Yeah.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. I'm glad that you picked up on this as well, because this is nothing I don't think he gets credit for. He manages to kind of be the straight man, and the comedy man at the same time. And I don't think anyone else can do it as well as him. No,
and I was thinking, watching this show, Hogan, I can't even remember when part of the show was, but Mean Gene's interviewing Hogan. Maybe it was here. And the way Hogan was doing his promo and shouting and doing the whole wide-eyed, everything else. I feel like in this day and age, if someone tried to do an interview like that, the interviewer would be like kind of giggling and like laughing, right. It's like so ridiculous. But for some reason, back here in 1994, it just seemed like a shoot, what I mean? Like normal, like, right. People try to do it now, everyone be like, what on earth are they doing? I was thinking that. And I think that's a shame because
I do.
Yeah, don't you? It's just
100%.
But I don't know if people could take it seriously anymore. Speaking of seriously anymore, a very serious match next is Stunning Steve Austin takes on Ricky Steamboat. Now, Austin's run in WCW had a lot of matches with Ricky Steamboat. And I was thinking as Steve Austin was coming out here that Steve Austin or Stunning Steve Austin doesn't really get the credit he deserves, like because he went on to be Stone Cold Steve Austin. I feel like if there wasn't a Stone Cold Steve Austin, let's say there was just a Stunning Steve Austin and his career ended there, I feel like people would look back and be like, oh my God, that Stunning Steve Austin was just such an amazing worker. But because he went on to be Stone Cold Steve Austin, no one ever really talks about Stunning Steve. That being said, I thought this match was pretty damn rough, like really rough actually, which is weird. Very odd.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was great.
Oh, you did?
A little long, but
it was
great.
Long, and the crowd seemed dead. And there was one like point they were just working an armbar for, which seemed like forever. And I couldn't really get into this one for some reason.
No, that is true. There's quite a lot of like don't want to call them rest holds, but there were a lot of like pauses or punctuations in the match that just and it was already like, I don't know, was it it was over 20 minutes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it seemed it was. Yeah, I tell you what, I did like. I think this is a TV title, right?
US heavyweight. Title. Yeah.
So the crowd really woke up later in the match when they were doing like the tombstone reversals.
Yes,
which are very hard to pull off. Hard and easy, but yeah, your timing's got to be on properly for that. And I've seen a lot of people mess them up, so it's a pretty hard one to pull off. But what I really loved about this match is, and you don't see this enough in wrestling anymore, but as it was getting later and later in the match and Austin was getting his ass kicked more and more and more, and it seemed like more and more and more there's a good chance he could lose the title. He starts trying to get himself disqualified. So he keeps trying to, like, I guess at the time, I don't know how strict they were with it, but at the time, I guess this was when Bill Watts had taken over. It was illegal to throw your opponent over the top rope. So towards the end of the match, he keeps trying to backdrop Ricky Steamboat out the ring to get disqualified, to then like keep hold of the title, obviously, because the belt can't change hands on disqualification.
Right,
But Steamboat keeps holding on and getting himself back in the ring, but he keeps throwing him over the top. And then at one point, Steamboat comes off the top of an axe handle and he tries to pull the referee into the axe handle. And I just thought that was just pretty clever psychology, the idea that he's so desperate, you know?
Yeah, and the referee did try and disqualify him, but then Ricky Steamboat like pleaded with him not to so he could win it.
Yes,
like,
yes.
The real
pretty good psychology.
So I liked all of that. Yeah, no, I really, really enjoyed all of that stuff. You don't see that too often.
No, I feel like now everyone's just so concentrating on having like a good match, whatever that means. But like
they're not really
perfecting the moves. They're not really telling the story like they are here. But go on.
No, I agree. You know how there's some wrestlers now have like these little trademark moves that they think are good, but they should probably just not do. Like The Rock's sharpshooter looks terrible.
Right.
The Undertaker's old school, where he's just like shaking and on the ropes. It's terrible. Ricky Steamboat here does it like a frigging cat, you know? Just doesn't shake once. He does it properly. I thought that was really good because I actually don't think I've seen that move done by anyone other than The Undertaker. And then when I see someone like Ricky Steamboat do it, I was like, oh, that's how it's supposed to look.
So the old school from The Undertaker never really made sense to me. I don't really understand why The Undertaker did that as a move. And I don't understand why he called it old school. I guess when he first started doing it, he never called it old school. But when he did it later on, he did. But I can't, there's nothing old school about holding a guy's hand and walking along the top rope. Like when you say old school, you think of like working a chin lock or something like that. Not like
airplane spin.
Right. But like walking along the top rope, that's like more new school than anything else. So I always thought it was bizarre how Undertaker called it old school. But that move, it did seem a bit out of place for The Undertaker. Was it just because he was a big guy, he was super athletic and agile and he wanted to show it? Like one of those things where, I can do this move, so I'm going to do it. I think
it's a flex, but he doesn't, his skill on that is not as good as I think he thinks it is. I mean, it's still impressive. He's huge. But yeah, no. Oh, just real quick, what is the move actually called then, if not the old school? Do you even know?
I don't think it has a name really, other than old school, other than walking along the top rope.
Who did it first?
No idea. I doubt. I'm assuming people did it before The Undertaker. I mean, you see people do it now and they do different ones or they walk all the way around the ring and stuff. But to me, even as a kid, I thought the move was kind of a bit weird and a bit lame because to me, I always thought the guy whose arm is being held, can he not just pull him or push him? Or do you know what I mean? Are we supposed to think that he's like incapacitated the whole time whilst Undertaker just walks along the top rope? I mean, that is pro wrestling. It is, I do feel like The Undertaker, though, has been used as an excuse for years and years for wrestlers to do stupid stuff. Do you know what I mean? So someone would be like, I want to do this. And you go, oh, that's not too believable. And they'd be like, well, The Undertaker. And it's like, okay, yes, but Undertaker was an exception. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can't just keep, we throw all the rules out for wrestling because The Undertaker existed and he used to bury people alive and shoot lightning at people and all this other stuff.
Appear and disappear at will in a thunderstorm.
For him, it kind of worked. But no, Interesting that I love Stunning Steve Austin, and I thought him and Steamboat had a bunch of awesome matches. I wasn't as into this one, though. That being said, it did pick up towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, I really liked it. I was actually surprised that you said that. What, apart from the obvious pacing issues, like, did you really have a problem with?
Just that. I just was like kind of bored halfway through. Like, come on, guys, get to it.
Sometimes that's all it takes to take you out of an otherwise good match, I guess. But I think because it's so early on in the card, I guess, is why maybe if it was towards the end, like second from last, I'd feel different. But at this point in the show, no, it didn't take me out of it. I thought it was good.
Well, I think actually I must have hit this point when I was just ready for the main event, because the next match was, I forgot about this whole match as well. Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff took on Kevin Sullivan and Cactus Jack. Now, you know, I'm a fan of Kevin Sullivan, and we're all fans of Cactus Jack, and I even like Paul Roma. But tag team match for the tag team titles. I think this wasn't too long after Foley had his ear ripped off in Germany by Vader. And also I think at this point he was going back and forth with ECW. I guess WCW put him on lend to ECW because he's a tag team champion here for WCW. And I remember him getting a bunch of heat or whatever because in ECW he like spat on the WCW belt or something. I don't know. But yeah, I tell you what I will say about this. Paul Roma and Paul Orndorff, they come to the ring and they're both wearing those kind of traditional wrestling jackets, robes, right? I miss that style of robe and jacket in wrestling. And I was thinking about it. I thought, because back then, especially if you watch wrestling in the 80s, those sort of robes were very, very common. Do you know what I mean? Not the majority of wrestlers, but a lot of wrestlers would have robes like that. And obviously, more famously, kind of Flair really made it his thing, and his became more and more extravagant. But I did wonder, like, where that kind of started in wrestling. I mean, obviously, I'm guessing because the robes are always a thing in boxing, I guess, right? And then, but the wrestling made them. Obviously, someone in wrestling was like, "I'll have it like that, but make it a little bit more flamboyant." And then, did everyone just kind of follow suit from there?
Perhaps the way I read it is when Paul Roma takes off his, like, he reveals his physique, and it's like an event because they come to the ring like behind something, you know, if they're just walking out topless, like shirtless, you've already seen what he looks like, his physique, which is an impressive physique. And I think like that sort of, it's just like another part of the showmanship. No,
that I completely understand. Like an entrance, just gear in general, I get, but I mean that particular style, like the velvet or with the glitter, like that style of robe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, now that is old school.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Like, but like I'm trying to work out like when that started, and then like, was it just a case of that was the go-to for a wrestler to wear to the ring, much like, you know, trunks or boots or whatever else? But obviously over time it's kind of phased out. Do you know what I mean? Like no one really comes out with a robe like that now, unless they're trying to do like a callback to this sort of era or before this era, let's say. But like I said, I'm guessing boxers obviously wore robes, so then maybe wrestling adopted it from boxing, but a little bit more elaborate. And then like everyone was like, because in wrestling you have phases and things where people copy everyone else, and you know, everyone would have these style of robes with their name in the back in that kind of nice flowing writing in glitter and everything else. But yeah, I miss these styles of robes is basically what I was trying to get at. Unfortunately, wrestlers moving forward, they didn't copy Orndorff and Paul Roma. They copied more Cactus Jack and coming to the ring in t-shirts and everything else. But this match is really confusing because it seemed like both teams were heels. So the crowd just did not get into this at all. And in fact, the crowd was so bored with the match at one point, the crowd starts reacting loads, and I thought, they're getting into it finally, but they weren't. They were actually doing the Mexican wave during the match. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it's not disrespectful because it was such a bad match. This was a legit snooze fest. I would be trying to perk myself up as well if I was there.
So, there was a really funny point in the match where I think it's Bobby the Brain. He screams, "Look at the agility of Roma. He's like a cat," as Paul Roma pulls himself up to the top rope, then falls off at the same time. It's like, look at the agility of Roma. He's like a cat. Just completely falls on his ass. I was like, oh,
that's
God.
So funny.
That was good timing. That was like, that And did you notice Paul Orndorff's dancing elbow? Oh, you must.
Yeah.
I feel like Orndorff, obviously, because I've seen him do this sort of thing before, but clearly, like, the match is just not going anywhere. Crowd silence, and he just decides to pop himself, or he's trying to pop the boys in the match. But he does like a whole crazy dance into like a elbow drop forearm smash. The crowd doesn't even really react to it. They're kind of confused.
No, I mean, it's got to be said, there's already so much posing and like stalling in this match up until that point anyway. Yeah,
not a great, like, again, you don't really, it feels like every time you would see Mick Foley on any card always be somewhat of a good show or good match, but this was not one of them.
No way.
So it all leads to the main event. Finally, Flair versus Hogan. Like I said before, they're billing this as like the match of a lifetime or the match of the century. Go on, sorry.
Because like if you're going to say, I don't want to take your thing, but like Michael Buffer equates the next match to the moon landing, like unironically, which is like, come on.
I thought that was really good though. I like that.
Despite not knowing who Buzz Aldrin is, he's like, and Buzz Aldrin.
Well, so they have it's which one is it? Bruce Buffer, right?
Oh, did I said Michael Buffer. Who's the son?
Is it Michael Buffer?
I don't know. I think so.
We should probably get that right. It's probably Michael Buffer. I always get confused.
Yes, Bruce is his son.
So it's Michael Buffer.
Yes.
Well, he basically says, like a quarter of a century ago, like a few miles down the road from here, they sent the first man into moon, and now we're going to get to see this once in a lifetime match. I thought it was actually really cool.
What, the match or the setup?
No, just like Michael Buffer setting up.
Oh, no, it was cool, but it was a little bit over. I mean, you can't ever get too over the top, I guess, in wrestling. But like equating it to the moon landing was pretty funny. I just found out that Bruce Buffer is Michael Buffer's brother.
Yes, his brother.
Son.
Yeah. Not his son,
I always thought they was his son. Well, there you go.
No. Brother, that makes sense.
Cool.
For this match, it's funny because they send Nick Bockwinkel out, who I forgot at the time was the commissioner or general manager or whatnot of WCW. And he gets like zero reaction from the crowd. Obviously a wrestling legend, but no one there seems to know who he is. No. But when they send Shaq out there,
hell yeah.
Crazy reaction for Shaq. So Shaq comes out. First of all, Shaq is absolutely ginormous.
He's huge.
Yeah, and it made sense. They're in Orlando. He played for the Orlando Magic.
I think so, yeah.
Gets a crazy, crazy reaction. I was also thinking like, wow, Shaq's been on top for this is 1994. Like he's been on top for a long time, because he still pops up everywhere now making loads of money. So
yeah, good for him.
Does he live in Orlando still? I think he may.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
He's made a lot of money, I feel. But
he's always on commercials.
Yeah, he's always on commercials. But Hogan comes out with Mr. T. Was Mr. T still a thing in 1994? Or was this WCW just trying to like rekindle the magic that they had in the WWF?
I'm not sure, but in my head before watching this, Mr. T's massive in my head. And then when you see him next to Hulk Hogan and Shaq, it's like, oh my God. Like he looks like Kevin Hart,
Yeah, but Hogan is absolutely massive.
6'6", is he?
Something like that. He's massive. Yeah. And Shaq, obviously.
And Shaq is just insane. Yeah. And then little Jimmy Hart as well.
Little Jimmy Hart there as well.
So funny.
Yeah. But yeah, they're clearly trying to make this match sort of as big a deal as possible. Would you say you were a Hogan guy or a Flair guy? Because I guess that was the idea going into it. If you're a hardcore wrestling fan, I guess you'd have to pick a side, Hogan or Flair. But what would you say you stand
Probably on? Flair, because he was with Sensational Sherry, who I really like. And I just think they're a great team. And also they've got the kind of, what's the opposite of like a home field advantage, where it's like, he should be the main man. But then, like you said, Hulk Hogan's just swooping in and challenging him. He's almost like the underdog in his own home. So I think for me, Ric Flair. What about you?
Well, it's funny because they say, Hogan, former 5-time world champion. And obviously they're referring to
they don't say with who. Yeah.
With the WWF. But then Ric Flair is a 12-time world champion. But does that make Flair better or worse than Hogan? Because it's like, yeah, he's won it 12 times, but he's also lost it 12 times.
Right. True. Yeah. Good point.
But no, dude, this match, and this is the reason why I wanted to watch the show. Because I was like, well, we all remember Hogan joining WCW, but it's like the actual match, him versus Flair, people don't really talk about like the actual match. And I thought the match was absolutely awesome. Like, spoiler alert, my favorite match on the show by far. Again, people say Hogan can't wrestle. It's funny because here clearly he's like, well, I'll show these people. He'd been off for a good year or so since he did that King of the Ring match, or longer than a year. And like we mentioned earlier, he's a lot smaller, which kind of hurts him. But his wrestling ability, dude, he's like doing chain wrestling at the start. He's like taking Flair down with arm bars and stuff. There's just that massive misconception that Hogan can't wrestle, and it's like he can wrestle. He just a lot of time like doesn't do it because he's doing what works. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't need to train wrist locks and everything else. He cuts out all the bull crap and just gives people the good stuff, what they want. You know. But yeah, I just think it's bizarre that we didn't get this match in the WWF. I wish we did. I wish we got it at WrestleMania 8. Here in WCW, it doesn't feel as big a deal as it should have done. But the match itself, I thought, was really awesome. The crowd is hot as hell.
Oh, yeah, they were.
Like, so into it. I was a little confused at one point, though, because the crowd seems like they're going nuts. But then when I was looking at the front row, they don't seem to be moving a whole lot. And then I was thinking, like, did WCW sweeten this whole thing? But I don't know. That seemed kind of odd. So maybe if anyone's listening to this and knows, let us know. But no, Flair was
sweeten. Is that like put up the audio to make the crowd, or like
put in fake audio? Put in fake audio. Yeah. Which I don't think they did at the time, but I don't know. But Flair was awesome here. You know, using Sherry as a shield. Later in the match, it was awesome. Hogan goes to double clothesline Flair and Sherry, and as he does it, like the timing's kind of off, or the positioning is off, so he kind of clotheslines Flair, but and then misses just Sherry, but then kind of just like bitch slaps Sherry.
Slaps her, and then the crowd popped for that, didn't they?
Yeah, they're like, "Oh,
that was so funny.
We like that." But no, like the heat is awesome for this. Bobby the Brain Heenan on commentary is just awesome during this match because you know he's been feuding with Hogan this whole entire time. That's actually one thing we haven't mentioned throughout this show. For a few matches at least, Jesse the Body Ventura comes on commentary, and you can tell why he didn't last very long in WCW because clearly he didn't want to be there. He was just being a dick. He
was over it. Yeah, it was awful.
I think he hated Hogan.
And I love him, by the way.
I know. I love. Like
he's great.
Yeah,
but he just had such a sour face that whole time.
Yeah, I guess he didn't like Hogan, so maybe he was sulking because they just hired Hogan. But he didn't want to be there, and he didn't hide it at all, huh?
No, not at all.
But Bobby the Brain, I thought, was just absolutely awesome here. Yeah. We said about the other matches, like that Austin match, being like, "Oh God, it was so slow." This match just seemed like it didn't stop moving; it just kept going, and like it was just highlight after highlight, just. Two guys that just completely know what they're doing, and it's just like, magic to me. Like I really, really loved this match and enjoyed this.
I did as well. We both liked it. You really like this match, but you don't tend to gravitate towards like trenchant levels of overbooking and shenanigans. Do you think that it helped in this instance? Because sometimes you do, like with Speed and Randy Orton the other day in the Prime Bottle, stuff like that. Do you think this helped or hindered it? Because I think it helped, but I know I love it, and it's not really your thing.
But they didn't really
Sherry and Mr. T in the background, like just the constant, just all of the cuts to the apron, all of the shenanigans, the celebrity like managers or whatever. What do you think?
Right, but they weren't necessarily. No, I think to me, it didn't seem overbooked, really. Like,
okay.
Yeah, you had the celebrities on the floor and stuff, but Sherry getting involved, it was just a classic kind of wrestling manager / valet spot. Okay. You know what I mean? I think that helped a lot. No, I thought it was, I thought the Cody and Roman Reigns match at Mania was overbooked.
Yeah,
that was too much. Here, no, I didn't think so because
you didn't find it all too distracting from the actual.
No, because the crowd ate it all up as well.
Yes.
And like
exactly.
Hogan and Flair are kind of limited what they would do in the ring anyway. So, but I liked how they did it. Like this was a lot for them. Like Hogan missed the leg drop, but like Flair got on the figure 4 leg lock, and then later Hogan got on the figure 4 leg lock. The crowd's going nuts and everything else. And that's another thing that makes me laugh about Hogan is fans will be like, he's rubbish. Like his finisher is a leg drop. So they're suggesting that he's crap because his finisher is a leg drop. That to me would suggest that he's amazing. The fact that he can get a leg drop over as a finish. Do you know what I mean? That just tells me that he is a good worker, no?
Yeah, totally. And also this is from an era where what else was a finisher? Axe handle from Randy Savage. The only person with a legit finisher was probably Jake the Snake. And that was a DDT, which is just nothing now. So he brought that forward and he keeps doing it and it still works. I'm talking about the leg drop.
Yes. It is interesting kind of when like even the term, like I wonder when they first came up with the term like finishers. Because like you said, you watch wrestling in the 80s and stuff, like wrestlers didn't have necessary finishes. Like guys would maybe have like a trademark hold.
Yeah.
Like maybe Piper would use the sleeper or whatnot, but like I guess finishers became more of a thing the late 80s, early 90s, I guess.
After Mortal Kombat.
Maybe.
Fatalities. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. But no, like, yeah, to me, I just thought it was a really, really fun show. I don't know if you watch this, if you think like, oh, I'm going to continue watching WCW now. And of course, like with Hogan, it kind of was the law of diminishing returns. So he came there in 94. They popped a big number for this pay-per-view, and they still tried to keep him red and yellow for essentially like 2 years before he ended up doing the heel turn.
Yeah.
And I can imagine being a fan at the time being like, yeah, we're kind of over Hogan, especially when he started doing all the Dungeon of Doom stuff. And it was just like, I got a pretty, it didn't move with the times, that's for sure. But, wrestling as a whole in 94, 95, not great. And obviously then 1996, Hogan's ended up turning heel and became one of the biggest stars of wrestling again as well. So I think WCW, I feel like it definitely paid off them getting Hogan. And you do wonder what would have happened to WCW had they not got Hogan.
Right. Yeah.
It might have kind of went on and sort of fizzled out and disappeared, right? So,
maybe.
But yeah, you enjoyed this, Sam?
So honestly, like it was mixed for me. You asked earlier, does this make you want to watch more of that era of WCW? Not really.
No, yeah.
There was something rinky-dink about it. The broadcast quality of their cameras just like wasn't good. It just seems a little bit dated for me, not in a good way. Yeah, I didn't mind this pay-per-view for particular reasons, like the final match, and I also like the Stone Steve Austin match. I know you didn't so much, but as for like the actual like package or show, honestly, like it didn't impress. It's called Bash at the Beach. Wasn't even at the beach. Now, Baywatch's misinformation campaign led me to believe that WCW actually had events at the beach, because do you remember that episode of Baywatch?
Well, they did.
Oh, they did.
So Bash at the Beach 90. I'm not sure how many were at on the beach, but I remember Bash at the Beach 1995 was on the beach, and I thought it absolutely sucked. Just not a good idea. I was like, I get what you're trying to do, but like, if you think this was rinky dink, that just seems super. We could always review it for the podcast one day, but I don't really want to sit through the 3-hour show. But yeah, wrestling on the beach is not good. But
so
also,
careful what you wish for is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's kind of strange that. So they called this was as far as I'm aware, this was the first ever Bash at the Beach or Bash at the Beach. And it was in Orlando, where there's not actually a beach.
There's no beach. Either. Yeah, it's like the most landlocked part of Florida. Yeah.
Right. So that was kind of an interesting choice for the pay-per-view.
That's funny.
I'm surprised, unless maybe they'd booked it as Bash at the Beach before they knew they had Hogan versus Flair. Because honestly, if I had Hogan versus Flair for the first time, I would probably just call the pay-per-view Hogan versus Flair. Do you know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Or you would call the show, the pay-per-view name, something to do with that match. Do you know what I mean? Like the Epic Encounter or something like that.
You said it was mid-July. like in Florida, they've got the summary. Like you watched it because you had a summary vibe.
Yeah,
it
that's
kind of
maybe
makes
why.
sense what they were doing. But yeah, but you're right. Like Orlando, what beach?
Well, but it's kind of like once you had Flair versus Hogan, do you really need to like push
that as a summer
gimmick? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know, it is funny though how like WCW, how it managed to look so kind of like dated. Like you compare 1994 WWF to WCW, WWF looks far more, you know, up to date. WCW just had a thing where it just seemed really, really dated. Like it wasn't that whole much different here in 94 than it was there in 88. Do you know what I mean?
Right. When the camera's up and you can catch the lights on the ceiling and the camera's moving, it has the trail of the lights. Just like how it did in the 80s for WWF or, you know, other federations. Yeah, there's still happening. I think the quality of the technical quality of the production equipment does really contribute to it. This kind of like cheap rinky-dink feeling.
Yeah, and it makes sense.
It's not what I watch wrestling for, honestly.
Right.
Spectacle.
It seemed dated, and I think a big part of it as well is a lot of it is the talent as well, just a lot of older talent. And I think maybe WWF was right to go in that new generation, trying to get younger talent, whether it's Scott Hall or 1-2-3 Kid or, you know, these younger wrestlers, Shawn Michaels. Whereas here, WCW, they've got sort of, you know, Terry Funk, and then there's Bobby the Brain on commentary, and Gene Okerlund and Sherry Martel, and obviously Hogan and Flair and Paul Orndorff and Ricky Steamboat, a lot of these older, you know, Arn Anderson, like a lot of these older wrestlers, you know? So that kind of all contributed to WCW looking a little bit kind of dated. And that's actually how I felt as a kid. I felt like, WCW, it's got all the old wrestlers. Like I like this WWF, it's more modern and up to date.
Yeah. I mean, WCW did do it afterwards, right?
Yes.
Like Chris Jericho.
Later on.
This particular era, it's felt very, very dated. And I think that's a good metric to go by is like, did I feel this as a kid? Like when I was a dumb kid, kids know nothing. And even you knew then that this is feeling dated. Yeah, I think that's a good way, a good barometer.
Cool. I'm going to say my favorite match was Hogan and Flair, but also I really loved Guardian Angel versus Vader. I thought was awesome. And my least favorite match, I guess, the Cactus Jack Sullivan tag match with Roma and Paul Orndorff.
Very good. I think my favorite match of the night was the Sassy Boys versus a woman, which we didn't bring up. Do you remember that? Who were the Sassy Boys?
Oh, I looked into it. They were just like local Orlando DJs or something.
Oh, okay. So if we ever had a tag team, we'd have to come up with a different name because ours already been taken. No, I actually, honestly, you won't agree with me. I think I actually preferred the Steve Austin and Ricky Steamboat match to the main event.
Maybe I need to go back and watch it again. But
no, dude. Like I agree with your criticisms of it. And I actually feel like the main event was like a better match, like overall, because it didn't have certain things that let it down. But just, I think at the point where it was in the card, I've never really seen Stunning Steve Austin. So I was impressed with his athleticism. I think I'm going to go ahead and say that was my favorite match. But the main event and the Vader match was also like close second. It was pretty good. My least favorite match was the Kevin Sullivan Cactus Jack tag team match. It was just rancid, absolutely rancid.
If you had to give this show, well, you do have to give this show a grade. What are you giving this show?
A 2.
Really? I mean, you just said 3 matches that you really enjoyed.
Yeah, but I'm grading this on a whole, and just like the quality, everything about it was just like I would never watch this again.
I think you're being a little harsh on it. I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it 3 stars because I thought the opening with Johnny B. Bad was pretty decent. Vader and Guardian Angel I thought was good,
surprisingly good.
And there's also one moment of the show we didn't bring up, like I thought it was really cool, like the heel promo backstage after Anderson had turned on Dustin, and they're all backstage with Terry Funk and Bunkhouse Buck. I'm trying to say that right. And then drinking champagne and stuff. I thought was really, really well done. It just seemed like almost like a shoot. I thought it was really impressive. And then I did think they did do a good job as a whole, trying to make Flair and Hogan seem like a big deal and bringing in different celebrities and everything else. So I thought overall, like, there was definitely much worse WCW shows than this at the time. That's for sure. I would be a lot worse after this.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. Right. So it's pretty much as good as it gets to the early 90s, Sam. So
if we ever cover any of WCW from this era in the future, you think I might retroactively change my rating for this?
Yes. Well, yeah. Well, the thing is, though, there is quite a lot of WCW. Like, we still need to do like early 90s WCW where there's so much stuff that's like so good it's bad, or so bad it's good. Do you know what I mean? Like the Chambers of Horrors, which I don't think you've ever seen. I don't think you've ever seen RoboCop in WCW. There's a lot of stuff that's like, woof. So this compared to all that was pretty impressive.
Would you like us to cover more WCW, early era WCW? Let us know. And do you also agree? Do you feel more in line with me being a little harsh, or with Marty, who can enjoy it for what it is? And there was certainly good moments of it. So yeah, let us know in the comments or via email, mail@thevillainpod.com.
Samuel, do we have any reviews this week?
Oh, we actually do. Are you ready? This is a nice one. I say this is a nice one. Like, first of all, like, we get bad reviews. We don't. And also, like, if we did get a bad review, like, I'd read it out on the of course it's okay. Yeah, so very cool. Gordon Bombay and Lemonade, which is a nice drink, says this podcast is too sweet. I thought you'd like that. Started listening to this pod last week, binged the Foley retirement arc, which I'm quite proud of that we did. I think it was a good.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a good one. Yeah. Being a child of the 90s, it's great to listen to the opinions that you'll have on the Attitude Era pay-per-views. We're not too kind on them. It's nostalgia mixed with great takes about the past. I love the insight Marty provides from a professional wrestler's point of view. Looking forward to some more Attitude Era pay-per-views. Keep up the great work. I mean, we can certainly do them. There's enough to talk about. For sure.
Sounds like we're going to have to go back and do some more Attitude Era Raws for... He didn't give his real name then?
No, he masked it with his favorite drink.
Okay, well, thank you. What was his name then again?
Gordon? Gordon Bombay and Lemon. Yeah, we'll call him Gordon.
Well, thank you so much, Gordon, for that 5-star review. We really do appreciate it. That helps us out a lot with the algorithm.
Yeah, it does.
So if you're listening... please give us a 5-star review and we'll give you a shout out. And you can use your real name, which we will then read out and everyone will be like, oh, what a cool guy. He actually writes reviews. So we appreciate you, Gordon. That is awesome. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please follow us on the social media at The Villain Pod. We're on the Instagram, the YouTube, and the TikTok. You don't stop. And I think that pretty much covers everything. Oh, if you really enjoyed the show, you can head over to my Pro Wrestling Tee store, prowrestlingtees.com/Marty Skell. Pick up a Chillin With The Villain hoodie. There's also lots of villain merchandise on there as well. So pick that up. But yeah, Sam, I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, that's everything. And yeah, if you get some merch, send us an email of you wearing it proudly. That would be pretty cool to see, wouldn't it, man?
Yeah, and we'll give you a shout out on the podcast.
And we'll give you a shout out. All right. And apart from that, yeah, that's everything from me. So as ever, have a good week. Till next week.